Marvel World Unleashed, Villain Resurrects Ancient Gods from Myth. Like, share and subscribe. Episode 31. Tony didn't take his morning palpitations seriously. He also thinks it's okay that he can't remember what dreams he had. After all, this situation is quite common. He got dressed and headed out of the house for New York. After he announced that he was Iron Man, the stock price of Stecker Industries could be said to have skyrocketed. Tony didn't really care about that. After all, wealth is just the easiest thing for him to get. Compared to the company, he cares more about Pepper. After arriving at the company, Tony strode to his office. Pepper was already packing up the files in it. Looking at Pepper's busy figure, Tony felt a burst of satisfaction and comfort in his heart. "Good morning, Pepper." "Oh, good morning, Tony. Why didn't you come in and make a sound?" "Maybe you were too attentive to hear it." Tony came to Pepper's side, looked at the other's cheeks, examined it for a moment and said, "It looks like you've been staying up badly lately. Of course, you don't look at how busy the company's business has been recently, and there were people who could help me when Nate was there before, and as a result, you kicked the other party away with a word." Tony twitched his nose and said rather unpleasantly, "I don't want to appoint a special agent as my secretary." Now Tony already knows Natasha's true identity, which makes him very unhappy with his previous decision to recruit her. "Okay." Pepper was helpless. "But if you're really busy, I can find you a few more secretaries," Tony said. Pepper thought for a moment and shook his head. "Forget it, a lot of things have been very important recently, and I really don't feel comfortable if I hand it over to others." "Well, you said it yourself. Of course, it would be best if my boss could help me a little." The corners of Tony's mouth picked, and his expression was very indifferent. This made Pepper laugh helplessly. After that, the two began to work. Pepper kept reporting many documents to Tony, and Tony was still serious about dealing with them one by one. It's just that he is still playing mobile games while processing. In the blink of an eye, the day is over. Pepper said goodbye to Tony and left, and Tony stretched out and looked out the window at the bustling world. He remembered Nick Fury's words last night. Protect the planet, defend the people. How to think about this kind of thing does not match his temperament. But he really liked the bustling and calm scene in front of him. It's night. Tony lay down on the bed again, his eyes closed, and he fell asleep. When his consciousness came to his senses again, he came to a strange space. He was walking on a long causeway built over a swamp, surrounded by darkness that he could only make out a little moist vegetation towering. As he walked slowly, he gradually saw a land stretching for countless years, on which stood magnificent stone buildings. Giant stone blocks are arranged in a way that seems chaotic but actually hides order. The style of those buildings gave Tony a strange sense of déjà vu. He always felt like he had seen this style of architecture somewhere. But he couldn't remember. He continued along the causeway, and then he saw the ocean, a vast expanse of steam, stretching beyond the majestic stone city. Huge shadows of strange shapes move above the water, and strange fountains erupt from various places on the surface of the water. On the other side of the ocean, he saw a jungle. It is covered with speckled trees, grooves and stripes. From Tony's direction, the jungle looked like a big mouth hidden in the night, as if waiting to devour some lost fool. Tony looked at everything in front of him, his heart extremely strange and puzzled. He can be sure. In his limited life, he had never been to such a place. But why does it give him a sense of familiarity here? It's like he used to come. And just as Tony was thinking, the picture in front of him suddenly rotated. When Tony came back to his senses, a tall, unreadable creature appeared in front of him. The moment he saw that creature, Tony's heart suddenly arose with incomparable fear. He tried to escape, but found that he couldn't move anyway. So he could only watch as the creature stretched out its tentacle-like thing and stroked him. The moment the thing touched Tony, who was sleeping on the bed, suddenly opened his eyes. The whites of his eyes were bloodshot, and his expression still had a residual look of fear. The palpitations in his heart made Tony feel very uncomfortable. This is a second nightmare. Once again, Tony tried to recall what he had dreamed about. But as happened early yesterday morning, he didn't have any memories of dreams in his mind. Episode 32. Tony, who experienced this feeling for the second time, no longer cares as much as yesterday. He conducted an all-round exploration of his own body. He thinks that perhaps an organ in his body is causing this condition. He advocates science and does not easily think in the direction of some gods. After some examination by Jarvis, Tony's body has no problems other than palladium poisoning, which has long been known. This made Tony frown a little. Could it be palladium poisoning? But Tony hadn't heard of any symptoms. Tony thought for a moment and decided to take some sleeping pills tonight. Maybe then you won't be disturbed by that blank nightmare. Tony thought of this and went to the company again. Pepper saw the slight fatigue of Tony's expression today, and also noticed the bloodshot in Tony's eyes. This gentlewoman took the initiative to care for Tony. This made Tony very welcoming. The time of the day passed quickly. That evening, Tony sat on the edge of the bed and swallowed a sleeping pill. Then he closed his eyes and went to sleep. This time, when his consciousness came to his senses, he was in a majestic vaulted room, the high stone dome almost hidden in darkness. The interior of the room is extremely spacious, but the decoration on display is simple and rustic. He saw huge round windows with soaring arched doors, and pedestals or tables almost as high as ordinary rooms. On the walls of the unknown stone species are lined wide shelves of dark wood, on which are placed heavy texts of astonishing size, and the backs of those texts are marked with strange pictograms. The rest of the stone in the room has bizarre carvings, usually curved designs that follow mathematical principles. Some places are also chiseled with inscriptions that look like the symbols that appear on the backs of giant books. The dome is made of horrifically large boulders, layers of stones stacked on top of each other. Tony also saw the writing instrument on the stone table, which was some kind of long rod-shaped pen, but very large. The windows in the room were glassed and divided into small compartments by a very sturdy-looking fence, and Tony leaned over to look out through the window. It is a majestic and mysterious stone city. The moment he saw the city, Tony immediately realized that he had seen it before. He thought of his blank nightmare from the other day. The clever Tony immediately understood the situation. It's clear. That blank nightmare content is actually everything in front of you. Tony also knows that he is in a dream. He tried to sober himself up, but to no avail. The current situation forced Tony to focus on the scene in front of him. What the hell is here? Why did he dream about this? Why doesn't he remember after he wakes up? These questions prompted Tony's curiosity to grow. He tried to flip through the heavy books on the shelves, but the moment he touched the books, the picture in front of him turned upside down. Then, a tall and hazy figure appeared in front of him. At this moment, Tony finally realized why he didn't remember the content of the dream every time he woke up. And at this moment, the tall figure waved something like a tentacle and touched Tony. Then there was the same scene as the previous 2 days. Tony woke up again from his dream. His face looked extremely bad, and his eyes were filled with anger and confusion. What the hell is going on? Once again, he tried to recall the content of the dream. But the result is still the same. It was blank, and I couldn't think of anything. This made Tony feel a sense of being fooled and ridiculed. He slammed the bed quilt angrily and walked to the underground studio. He wanted to create something that could record dreams. This time, he relies on the power of technology to recreate his nightmare. New York, Brooklyn. Liang, who was snuggled by the sleeping Jessica, quietly watched Tony's behavior, and the corners of his mouth pulled out a curve. This is just the beginning. Tony, enjoy the story I've prepared for you. Maybe you'll thank me at the end of the day. Liang chuckled in his heart. A few more days passed. These days, Tony wakes up from nightmares every day. At the same time, every day he wakes up earlier. The ever-shortening sleep time made his physical and mental state worse and worse. Pepper saw it in his eyes and hurt in his heart. But her concern and advice did not help. He was even rejected by Tony, who was in a state of mental depression. This made Pepper feel helpless and heartache. Tony felt sorry for Pepper, but he wasn't going to explain anything. He wanted to apologize to Pepper after he solved this damn nightmare. Underground studio. Tony, with stubble on his face, was welding a delicate instrument with red eyes. When the welding was over, Tony couldn't help but cheer. His dream recorder is finally ready. Damn nightmare, I must crack your secret tonight. Tony just held the little thing in his hand and said angrily. Episode 33. Tony went to his bedside and then put the dream recorder to his forehead. This is a prop that records the radiation of brainwaves after falling asleep and then converts them into a three-dimensional view. That's what Tony can develop. Tony was in a good mood before he went to sleep today because he thought he was one step away from cracking his nightmare. Then he closed his eyes peacefully. Then his consciousness reappeared in the mysterious stone city. Although Tony does not remember the content of his dreams when he is awake. But after falling into a deep sleep, these dream contents will be remembered by Tony again. Thanks to this feature. In these few days of dreams, Tony has already traveled a lot in this stone city. Although this dream about the stone city tormented Tony for a long time. But Tony had to admit one thing. That is, the stone city contains knowledge far beyond modern science. How to judge the level of science and technology of a civilization? By those high-end scientific inventions? No. What determines the level of science and technology of a civilization is always the most basic thing. Those most widely used basic formulas are the yardstick for judging the level of a civilization's science and technology. The stone city in front of Tony's eyes at this moment is built on a mathematical formula that Tony has never touched. That mathematical formula is more than the entire current understanding of the mathematical world in the human world. The geometry that mankind is proud of in front of this stone city is nothing more than a beach castle built by children. Fragile and fragile. And the seemingly rough and primitive appearance of the stone city is just a disguise. Only the truly wise can see the incomprehensibility beneath this primitiveness. Tony tries to study the city in front of him in his dream. He made a stone slab and stone pen for recording in a certain house. But alas, every time he comes in, the previous progress is erased. This slowed Tony's research. However, everything will be different from today onwards. Relying on a dream recorder. Tony is completely capable of researching the stone city in front of him in reality. And with the assistance of Jarvis, the progress will be greatly improved. Just as Tony walked happily in the city, the picture in front of him suddenly turned upside down. Tony is completely unafraid of this phenomenon. It's just encountering the unknown and hazy creature and being repatriated back to the real world. He's ready. But this time things were a little different. This time, Tony, he saw the monster in front of him. Clear and vivid, no more hazy mist obscured. It was a creature with a body like a huge cone, about 10 feet tall. Its skin was covered with folds. It looked extremely disgusting and ugly, and between the folds were one cruciform bone joint after another, and there were mucus adhesions between the bone joints. The tip of its conical pointed body is not a skull, but four retractable tentacles about 30 centimeters wide, one with a head at the top and a straw channel with 4 holes at the top. The other 2 tentacles have huge hook claws or pincer claws growing at the ends, which are hideous and terrifying. At the bottom of it, there is a sticky layer like jelly, which is shrinking one by one at this time, and with the contraction of this sticky layer, its figure is slowly approaching Tony. The moment he saw the monster in front of him, Tony immediately let out a terrified cry. Fack! What the hell is this? When Tony cursed, the terrifying creature actually stopped. It looked like he was surprised by something. This had never happened in Tony's previous dreams. This made Tony acutely aware that things might turn around. He tried to communicate. Hey, looks like you can hear me, can we talk? The cone monster was visibly in a state of thought after hearing Tony's words. Its tentacle head was looking at Tony with a complicated look, which made Tony psychologically stressed. Then I saw that the conical monster emitted some kind of strange spiritual fluctuations. This fluctuation invisibly seeped into Tony's mind. Immediately after that, Tony heard the words that belonged to the monster. Yes. Tony immediately let out a long sigh of relief. The nightmare of infinite loops has finally taken a new turn. Episode 34. New York, Brooklyn. Leon watched the story development in Tony's dream and felt a little interesting. This is a storyline development that he did not expect. The monster in that Tony's dream is called the Great Race of Isis in the mythology. This is a race that has a civilization far beyond the current human beings on Earth. According to the setting of the Great Race of Is, it is also called the Trumpet Race in the mythology of the Gram system. In simple terms, they can possess another creature by means of spiritual projection. Then the body of this creature is used to study and investigate the era in which the creature lives. This behavior is very much like a number theft in cyberspace. The time range and spatial span of this projection object can even span tens of millions of years. Therefore, the great race of Islam succeeded in learning knowledge that far surpassed its own race countless years later by relying on this spiritual projection technique, which can be called heaven-defying. They also know what will happen in the future. In a way, this can be said to be another kind of omniscience. In the original book, this race even fought with the star dependence of Cthulhu, and to a certain extent, they fought evenly matched. That's why they were called great races. Of course, Leon's current point of influence cannot create the entire great race of Is, but he also has the aid of special scene building cards. According to his original vision, the great race of Isis would first steal Tony. Then someday in the future, Tony will wake up from the stolen number state and investigate all this. Until he found the lost city that Liang had already prepared for him. At that time, the ancient mission will impact everyone. But now, the direction of the plot has taken an interesting twist. Tony successfully hooks up with the great race of Is. Where does this lead the story? This unexpected development made Liang like a person chasing a drama at this time. He will watch carefully what happens next to satisfy his curiosity. The screenwriter who made up the story became a curious audience at this point. In Tony's dreams. At this time, he has been taken to a strange place by the monster in front of him. There are stone pillars, quirky and mysterious technological equipment, and quaint gray-yellow floor tiles. The construction of those technological devices is far beyond Tony's understanding, and those that are almost primitive and advanced splices are driven by an energy that Tony cannot understand. Tony wanted to ask, but when he looked at the silent monster in front of him, Tony still chose to shut up from the heart. After following the monster into a door, Tony saw more monsters. Tony's subconscious hair in his heart. The monsters also cast their gaze on Tony's body. Their eyes were strange and surprised, as if asking why Tony was here. But with the leading monster's mental communication with them, their strange eyes turned into surprise. It's like there's something incredible in Tony. This made Tony even more puzzled. Finally, the long march was over. The terrifying monster brought him to the tallest monster. It's obvious. The other party is the leader of this group of monsters. Tony tried to look directly at the other person, but felt a feeling of dizziness from the other person. Interesting human. The voice from the monster leader echoed in Tony's mind. Tony tried to ask. Hello, respected unknown being, may I ask why you brought me here? Tony Stirk, who has always shown defiance in the outside world, showed some humility at this time. If outsiders see it, they will be surprised. Tony is not an arrogant person, and at some point, he knows how to bow his head. Just like now. We are the great race of Is, living on Earth 400 million years ago from you, trying to gain knowledge from you 400 million years later. The words of the ISS leader made Tony's mind immediately confused. Earth 400 million years ago? Wait, you mean, you're 400 million years away from my time? Are you also creatures on Earth? It's not scientific, and if what you say is true, how did you find me in these 400 million years? Tony's mind kept recalling about the evolution of Earth's geological epochs. 400 million years ago, that was the era of the birth of large-scale explosions of primitive organisms on Earth. At that time, the biological life forms were extremely low level. How could there be an obviously highly developed biological civilization group in front of them? Just as Tony was spinning his brain frantically, one of the tentacles of the leader of Nis emitted spiritual fluctuations. This mental fluctuation flooded Tony's mind, along with all kinds of knowledge about Is. Tony was stunned at this moment. Episode 35. Pepper this morning noticed that Tony hadn't come to the company late. So Pepper called Tony. But no one answered. After 10 minutes of continuous phone calls and no answers, Pepper panicked. She thought about Tony's mental state during this time, and for a while many terrible speculations were born in her mind. In this emergency, Pepper thought of Natasha. She thought that the other party, as an S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, would definitely have a way to help her. Natasha had left contact information for Pepper before. So Pepper called Natasha. Hi, Pepper, what's wrong? Natasha's words on the phone carried a hint of gentleness, but at this time, Pepper had no intention of exchanging too many pleasantries with the other party. Natasha, something may have happened to Tony, I need your help. Pepper's somewhat bewildered words made Natasha on the other end of the phone immediately become serious. "Don't panic, I'll pass." Natasha's voice fell, and she hung up. Standing in place, Pepper clasped his hands together in front of his chest. Her face was full of worry and panic. His mouth is still chanting words like God's blessing. Soon, the people of S.H.I.E.L.D. came to Stucker Industries. It was Natasha, dressed in black, who was taking the lead, followed by the Coulson team. They ignored the sight of the others and went straight to the top floor, and Pepper immediately felt a sense of relief when she saw Natasha, and she immediately stepped forward and said, "Thank God you're finally here." "Pepper, don't get excited, tell me what happened to Tony first." Natasha gave a soothing sigh of comfort, and then took the other's hand and sat down. Then Pepper told Tony that something was wrong recently. The more Natasha listened, the more bad she felt. When Pepper said that Tony had disappeared this morning, Natasha's brows squeezed together. "Pepper, don't worry, we'll find Tony and find out what's going on." Natasha patted the back of Pepper's hand and immediately said to Nick Fury across the earphone, "Fury, you should have heard it all. Yes, I have sent Hawkeye to Stokes Villa to look for him. You stay where you are and protect Pepper." "Good." After communicating with Nick Fury, Natasha asked Coulson to take someone on guard for 4 weeks. Such a momentum made Pepper's just somewhat calm heart dislike the waves again. "Natasha, Tony. It's going to be fine, right? Don't worry, it won't." While Natasha comforted Pepper, Hawkeye, who was far away in California, also arrived in front of Tony's beach house. Behind him was also a squad. They soon entered the villa through the means of S.H.I.E.L.D. Then Hawkeye gave the search order. Along with the search, a signal came from the direction of the bedroom. Hawkeye hurried to the scene. When he arrived at the bedroom, what he saw was Tony Stark, who was in a deep sleep. At this time, the other party was peaceful and seemed to be in some kind of beautiful dream. "Tony Stark, wake up." Hawkeye tried to wake Tony, but that didn't wake Tony up. This made Hawkeye immediately contact Nick Fury. "Fury, I applied for a helicopter to come and pick up. Tony Stark is currently in an unawakened coma and needs to be taken to the Bureau for further analysis." "Okay, the helicopter has arrived, guard Tony Stark until then." "Okay." While Natasha and Hawkeye were each in action, Nick Fury, who was on S.H.I.E.L.D., was frowning tightly. Tony's coma was something he hadn't expected. Although Nick Fury knows that Tony currently has palladium poisoning, he should be fine in a short period of time. So what's going on with this coma? Nick Fury had a hard time figuring it out. More than an hour later, the helicopter carrying Tony Stark successfully landed at the S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters building. A group of people went to pick up Tony Stark, who was in a coma. They pushed Tony Stark on the hospital bed and immediately went to the internal S.H.I.E.L.D. laboratory. Pepper, who was watching this scene from the sidelines, couldn't help but cry. "What the hell is going on, Tony? Don't scare me." Natasha gently patted Pepper's back. "Pepper, don't think too much, maybe Tony has just been too tired lately, so he can't wake up for a while. I should have told you about his situation earlier, and then maybe there would be no current situation." Pepper's cry was tinged with remorse and deep self-remorse. "You've done a great job, Pepper." 2 women in the building hugged. At this time, in the S.H.I.E.L.D. laboratory, a large group of experts in white coats were testing Tony Stark in an all-round way. Outside the transparent glass of the laboratory, Nick Fury looked at this scene with a solemn expression. If there's anyone other than Pepper who wants something wrong with Tony the most, that's Nick Fury. Whatever the reason, Tony is vital to S.H.I.E.L.D. Episode 36. In the blink of an eye, half a month has passed. Lying inside S.H.I.E.L.D., Tony Stark didn't mean to wake up. Every day, different experts will take blood and neurological tests to monitor each other's health. Fortunately, Tony Stark's health has always remained at the same level as ordinary people. The current Tony Stark is simply a vegetative person. No one knows when he will wake up. Today, Pepper came to visit Tony again. After experiencing sadness and despair, Pepper grew up quickly. During Tony's absence, she worked hard as Tony's assistant to steer the giant ship Stark Industries. Although there were some troubles during the period, they were solved smoothly with Natasha's help. Compared with her in the first half of the month, Pepper can be said to have undergone a metamorphosis from a white-collar worker to a strong woman. But the one who cares and worries her most is always Tony. Tony, when the hell will you wake up? Pepper spoke lowly, her eyes quietly looking at the calm Tony, which was full of pain. And outside the transparent ward, Nick Fury is also watching this scene. Beside him was a calm-looking Natasha. Did you find anything? No, Tony Stark had no contact with anyone before the accident, nor did he find out that the other party had touched any strange items, and the only useful clue was the sleeping pills placed at the end of his bed. So you're trying to tell me that that's how Tony Stark fell into a kind of slumber? Nick Fury's one-eyed look at Natasha said. From all the current investigations, it seems that it can only be explained. Natasha didn't feel any pressure on Nick Fury's gaze, she calmly told her opinion, and Nick Fury sighed. Ma J. Fack, it's really irritating. Nick Fury cursed in a low voice. At this time, Pepper walked out of the ward. She nodded at Nick Fury and Natasha, then turned and walked away. She's going back to keep looking after the company. It's a strong woman. Nick Fury looked at the other person's back and sighed. Natasha on the side also nodded in agreement. Continue to investigate, and be sure to find out what happened to Tony Stark. With all due respect, Fury, which direction should we investigate now? Natasha's words made Nick Fury dumb. Now it's just a headless fly. I don't know where to fly. And in reality, a whole bunch of people are busy for Tony Stark. Tony, who is still in a strange dream, is learning all kinds of knowledge from the great race of Islam with unprecedented enthusiasm and curiosity. Since that day, he learned about the great race of Islam from the spiritual fluctuations of the leader of Is. Tony Stark was full of exuberant curiosity about the race in front of him. The ability to project spiritually through endless time and space, far beyond the current black technology of the Earth, and the large library that records the knowledge of the future world. The great race of Isis possessed these things, shocked and disbelieving Tony Stark in his heart. After learning that the Isxinians decided to exchange knowledge with him, the surprise in Tony Stark's heart was completely overwhelmed by him. For Stark, an opportunity to acquire more knowledge is like a drug. He immediately agreed. He came to write down the message of his time and provide it to the great race of Is, in exchange for allowing Stark to read the vast sea of books hidden in their great library. Those books contain the truth about this dark universe, and even more hidden new science and technology from the distant future. Suppose there is a scholar here. Then he would definitely be willing to die for the infinite knowledge of this library. Intellectual curiosity is the most instinctive human desire. No one escapes this desire. Tony Stark, you should go back. A voice suddenly sounded in Tony Stark's mind. This interrupted Tony, who was reading. He turned his head strangely, and a tall ISS creature was standing beside him. Hey Doc, I've only seen this book halfway, I can't go back. Sorry, this is an order from the leader, your spirit has been away from your body for a long time, if you don't go back, you will completely stay in this era. Doc's words made Tony look frustrated. Shit, if only Jarvis were here, then I could pack all my knowledge and take it away. Stark, it's not a good thing to be too addicted to this knowledge, there are many things hidden in it that humans should not touch. Oh, do you mean the books that contain information about the old dominators and the ancient gods? Come on, Doc, I won't believe it, you are also a high-level civilization, why do you believe in those myths and stories so much? Tony's words silenced Doc for a while, and in the silence he seemed to remember something, and his floating head showed a look of fear. Stark, I can't specifically mention certain things to you, there are certain taboos involved, but I advise you not to speculate and talk about the old dominators and ancient gods. Okay, I respect your taboos, I maintain eternal respect for those old rulers and ancient gods, okay? It's better to always be that way. Tony didn't pay too much attention to Doc's words, and he closed the book in front of him with some disappointment, which was a book that recorded thousands of years of technology beyond Tony's time. Do I have to go back? Yes. Then accompany me for a walk around the city. Good. Faced with Tony's request, Doc did not refuse. So two figures, one high and one low, slowly walked in this stone city. Doc, why did the leader allow me to stay here in the first place? Even allow for an exchange of knowledge with me? As I said before, because your spiritual power is very special, you have several times the spiritual power that surpasses the same human being, which is why I couldn't smoothly project your spirit in the first place. Is that the only reason? Isn't there any more unique reason involved? Now that I'm leaving, you can tell me the truth. Nope. Well, that's a disappointment. Tony smashed his mouth, then he stopped and faced the tall monster in front of him. Doc, can I come back? I don't know, maybe it will, maybe not. Well, I'll miss it when I go back. I will miss you too, you are my only friend outside my own clan. Then I really feel honored. Tony laughed. Goodbye, Tony Stark, go back to your time. Doc waved his tentacles, and a dark spiritual fluctuation enveloped Tony. At the last moment of parting, Tony waved at Doc in front of him. Goodbye, Doc, I'll try to dig up your ruins when I get back. Then be careful when you dig and don't release it. Under the floor. Doc's last words Tony didn't hear. When he tried to listen hard, everything in front of him turned into nothingness. The next moment. In reality, he suddenly opened his eyes. Episode 37. When the news of Tony Stark's awakening reached Nick Fury's office, the other party's heart was immediately relieved. He hurried to the transparent ward. Natasha, Coulson and the others are already here. Layers after layers of guards are even more strictly defensive. Nick Fury's arrival did not surprise everyone. How's it going? Nick Fury asked as he stood outside the transparent ward and looked at Tony, who was undergoing a large group of expert examinations. Coulson immediately reported. I didn't notice anything out of the ordinary, but when I asked Tony Stark what was going on, he was hiding some key information. Coulson's words made Nick Fury's eyes narrow. Then Nick Fury walked into the hospital room himself. Tony also greeted Nick Fury with interest. I've heard Coulson say the specific things, and this time it's thanks to you. I took note of this favor. Tony Stark, if you really want to thank us, tell me the real reason for your coma. Nick Fury's words didn't make Tony care. He twitched his nose and replied. Didn't I tell all of your agents? Didn't they tell you about it? I don't know why I was in a coma for so long, probably because of the shadow of being kidnapped before. Nick Fury looked at Tony silently. But even so, Tony kept his original rhetoric. This annoyed Nick Fury, but he tried to keep it calm. Well, since you have a secret, then I won't force you to say it, but how did you think about the thing we said earlier? Hey, I just woke up, let me slow down, okay? Then you slow down. Nick Fury walked out of the ward dissatisfied, and Tony's lack of cooperation really caused the King of Agents a headache. If it were an ordinary person, he would have already shot down with a needle of real medicine. But for Tony Stark, he really can't force the other party. After all, many plans in the future involve the other party, and if they offend ruthlessly, it will not be worth the loss. Fury, what now? Natasha asked casually as she chewed gum in her mouth. Wait. By the way, give me all the monitoring, Stark. I want to know what he will be doing in the next time. Don't let go of a single thing. Nick Fury said fiercely from between his teeth. Yes, Chief. Coulson immediately agreed. Soon, Pepper arrived. When she saw Tony awakened, she burst into tears on the spot, and then the two hugged. Stark also expressed his gratitude and guilt to Pepper on the spot. This seemingly sweet scene made Nick Fury quite uncomfortable watching. Obviously, He-Shield is the one who has the most power. How did you end up getting nothing? What am I a fack? Tony then followed Pepper back home in California. When Tony returned to his home, he felt extremely close. After the others left, Tony hugged Pepper tightly. Pepper, I really miss you so much. Although Pepper still has a lot to ask Tony, nothing matters at this moment. The two hugged each other tightly, and after a while, they were on the bed. After the clouds clear, Pepper finally opened his mouth to ask his confusion. Tony, what happened to you? Tony hugged Pepper and said in a somewhat deep tone. Pepper, I encountered something I never imagined before. I can't tell you everything right now, but all I can say is that it was really an incredible experience, and if everything I encountered is true, then soon everything will change. Tony's eyes were a little excited, but his words made Pepper feel a trace of uneasiness inexplicably. But she didn't say anything more. She curled up in Tony's arms and said softly, I just hope you are safe. Tony gently kissed Pepper's forehead and smiled. Don't worry, I will. The appearance of Tony Stark stabilized the rumored Stark Industries. He then launched a series of technology products within the company. Each of these technological products is extremely sophisticated and practical. It is simply an epic-making product. Once again, everyone saw Tony Stark's talent. Society was filled with praise for Tony. But Nick Fury, who is located inside S.H.I.E.L.D., always feels that something is wrong. His intuition was telling him something was going on behind it. He always felt that Stark Industries' newly launched products were related to Tony Stark's coma. But he was unable to find evidence about it. When Tony single-handedly promoted social change, Leon groped for the holographic mobile phone in his hand and couldn't help but sigh. The impact of this contact between Tony and the great race of Isis is really obvious. In 2008, holographic mobile phones could be used. Even if this is the Marvel Universe, it is bizarre enough. Episode 38. More than a month has passed since Tony Stark woke up from his coma. For more than a month, in addition to relying on the knowledge he gained from the Isis in his head to innovate the company's products, all he had left was for Jarvis to search the world for places where the Isis civilization might be buried. But it didn't turn out very well. Jarvis, how was the search going today? Returning home, Tony threw his clothes on the couch and asked casually. A voice from Jarvis suddenly sounded in the house. Sorry, sir, I still haven't found an eligible location. Okay, I see. Tony sighed. He took the bottle of wine from the refrigerator, opened it casually, and took a dry sip at the mouth of the bottle. He sat on the couch, his mind quietly recalling all the things about himself in that stone city. He was trying to find details that he had previously overlooked so that Jarvis could be more precise when searching. But he thought about it and ended up with nothing. This made Tony feel a little helpless. Could it be that the Isis civilization has completely sunk below the surface? Tony began to think about whether he wanted to make a device that could spy on the entire surface of the Earth. It sounds unlikely, but for Tony, it can be done with time. Just then, Jarvis's voice rang out. Sir, with all due respect, does the Islamic civilization you asked me to search for really exist? I examined digital collections around the world, and there was not a single mention of the Islamic civilization. Yes, it exists. Tony never doubted the truth of his previous experience. Because if that were fake, Stark Industries wouldn't have produced so many epic-making technology products in the near future. Behind these products is the knowledge that the Islamic civilization has given to Tony. Well, even if it does exist, you said that its age is at least 400 million years ago, and according to natural evolution, 400 million years is enough to make an entire continent collapse. Enough, Jarvis, I'm asking you to search for the Islamic civilization, not for you to come here to question me. Sorry, sir, I'll keep searching. Jarvis stopped talking. Tony walked to the living room window with wine in hand, and the Pacific Ocean slowly surged in the afterglow of the sunset, and the sparkling on the sea was extremely beautiful. But the views didn't make Tony's somewhat irritated mood any better. His mind was still obsessed with the Islamic civilization, and he was still recalling the scenes where he had stayed in the great library of the Islamic civilization. The vastness of novel knowledge like the universe is neatly displayed in it. He stayed there like a thirsty fish finally returning to the water. I really want to go back there. Tony really misses being there. But alas. Since waking up, he had never dreamed anything about the Islamic civilization. This made Tony's heart feel more and more lost and anxious. The feeling of missing out on that endless knowledge made Tony very painful. At this time, he was like a hungry man who had just obtained a loaf of bread, but was brutally taken away by a big hand. How about trying to contact the brine? Such an idea suddenly came to Tony's mind. He had already learned about S.H.I.E.L.D. through various channels. If he had let S.H.I.E.L.D. help him find the Islamic civilization, it would definitely be faster than Tony relying on Jarvis to find it alone. After all, the hidden forces behind S.H.I.E.L.D. are too large. But the thought of telling the message about the Islamic civilization in his mind made Tony feel very uncomfortable. As a wealthy class in the United States, he knew the character of those in power. If they knew that the remains of a civilization that had surpassed mankind for countless years were buried underground, then the quiet days of the entire Earth might simply be gone. Just as Tony was considering the pros and cons of this, Jarvis's voice suddenly came. Sir, I feel like I've discovered what you call the Islamic civilization. Huh? Tony's face changed immediately. Where? In the western part of the Great Sand Desert in Australia, a strong earthquake just struck there, and part of the stone remains were exposed from the desert, and after comparison, the special mathematical logic contained in it was in line with the architectural style you mentioned. Good. Tony waved his fist excitedly when he heard this, but Jarvis's voice followed. Sir, it is a coincidence that there happened to be a couple camping nearby at the time of the earthquake, and they also saw the appearance of the ruins, and reported the matter to the Australian authorities. Shit. Tony's initial excitement was immediately extinguished. Now was not the time for nonsense and overthinking. He had to contact S.H.I.E.L.D., and if he didn't immediately seal off the side of that ruin, the consequences could be terrible. So Tony immediately got through to Nick Fury's phone. When Nick Fury was still stunned, Tony immediately spoke. I agreed to the thing I said before. I joined the Avengers, and I hope that you can immediately send someone to block the ruins of civilization that have just appeared in the western part of the Great Sand Desert in Australia. I will tell you the details later. And act now. Although Nick Fury couldn't understand what was going on, he still responded immediately. In any case, the things that make Tony so nervous are definitely not trivial. And intuition is telling Nick Fury. If you can't seize the opportunity this time, then I'm afraid Tony and S.H.I.E.L.D. will definitely not cooperate in the future. Episode 39. A flight from Washington, D.C. to Australia in the United States normally takes at least 17 hours. But if it's with S.H.I.E.L.D.'s Kuan-style fighters, then this time will be greatly reduced. Not long after Tony's phone call, a Quinn fighter flew out of S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters. When the Kuan-style fighter reached the edge of the Great Sand Desert, Tony, wearing a steel suit, was already waiting here. Buzz. With the opening of the cabin door of the Kuan fighter, Natasha, Hawkeye, and Coulson walked out together, and more than a dozen S.H.I.E.L.D. special operations teams appeared at the same time. And at the end, Nick Fury also appeared here. This is an extremely rare situation, and he, the director, has rarely come out to operate. Tony stepped forward when he saw the people of S.H.I.E.L.D. arrive. He looked at Nick Fury with a complicated look and said, "Thank you for agreeing to my request in a timely manner. Well, no need to say more, I just want to know what secrets are hidden here, and it is worth your excitement." Nick Fury asked with curiosity in his eyes. Tony sighed slightly. He knew it was time to say it. After all, the remains of the Islamic civilization are at hand. I can tell you, but I need a relatively confidential environment, and the people who can know about this must be the people you trust the most. Good. Nick Fury dismissed all the special operations team members. Only Natasha, Hawkeye, and Coulson were left by his side. Well, now it's all people I can absolutely trust, you can say it. Nick Fury said in a condensed voice. Tony looked at the three people in front of him one by one, and then said, Fury, do you believe in alien civilizations? Or do you believe that on the Earth we live on, there was an extremely developed civilization in ancient times? Tony's words made Nick Fury look stunned. He said with a frown, If we talk about alien civilizations, I believe, but the ancient developed civilizations that live on Earth, I have some doubts. Yes, I understand you, and if I had never met them, I would have doubted them. Tony's words made Fury's eyes look confused, but then Tony's words turned their confusion into shock. When I first woke up from my coma, you and Agent Coulson asked me what happened to me, and I didn't tell you at the time, but now I can tell it. I met a civilization that lived 400 million years ago in my sleep. Maybe it's a little difficult to understand, but it's true. They have the ability to project spirituality across temporal and spatial dimensions. They chose me, but for various reasons, they didn't project on me. But we made a deal where I came to provide them with knowledge of our time, and they opened the library to me, where I learned a lot, and my company's new products benefited from that experience. Tony's words made all four of Fury look extremely strange. Tony could see doubt and disbelief in their eyes, but that didn't make Tony angry. After all, this experience is indeed too bizarre. But Nick Fury said after a long silence, I'm willing to believe you for the time being. So you mean that the ruins behind you are actually the remains of that civilization? Yes, I have confirmed it. This is their remnant. Nick Fury took a deep breath. He tried to calm his heart, but it always made waves. What do you want to do? Nick Fury asked, looking at Tony intently. I'm going to dig it. I once said to a friend of that civilization that sooner or later I will dig them out, and now it's time for me to fulfill my promise. Okay, I will do my best to assist you, but I hope you better not lie to me, otherwise this matter will be very serious. The Australian government is already solemnly protesting us. I need an outcome to block the mouths of those congressional masters. Nick Fury said seriously. Tony took a deep look at Nick Fury, and he had to admit that he was much less prejudiced against Nick Fury at this moment. "You're right, but I still hope that if there are real results, don't hand them over to the government, otherwise our government is not a safe master." Nick Fury nodded after a moment of contemplation. "I'll try my best." While Tony was discussing with Nick Fury and the others, Bullock Rumlow, who was in the special operations team, was staring at this side. He tried to hear what Tony was saying, but because of the distance and the dust that was raised from time to time, he couldn't steal any information. But he was sure of one thing. That is, the relics behind this must be important. 24 degrees 36 minutes south, 128 degrees 41 minutes east. When Rumlow vaguely reported the coordinates towards the cuff communication device, he once again returned to his serious state and toured the 4 directions. At this moment, Tony was already planning to dig. He did not intend to excavate it in all directions, but planned to dig a passage to enter the ruins first. He wanted to see the state of preservation of the books in the large library inside, and then judge whether to take large-scale excavations. At this moment, Tony's heart was full of excitement. He can't wait to return to the great library full of knowledge. Episode 40. Squeak. Rumble. With the strafing of laser rays, a heavy stone wall once again collapsed in front of Tony and the others. "Your steel armor is really useful." Hawkeye looked at the suit on Tony's body and couldn't help but sigh. Tony said without looking back. "How, want?" "No, I still trust the arrow in my hand more." Hawkeye responded. On the side, Natasha was intently recording the route after the 3 of them entered, as well as the mural paintings on the stone wall that were not very obvious. After Tony and Nick Fury reached an agreement, the 3 of them entered the ancient ruins as an exploration team. Nick Fury, on the other hand, returned to SHIELD headquarters in Washington, D.C. in a Quinn fighter. Coulson guarded the site outside the ruins to prevent anyone else from approaching. "How long is this tunnel?" Natasha asked. Tony scratched his cheek to make a look of remembrance. "About 30 meters more? Anyway, this is how I walked here, but I don't know if the ISIS have made any changes to the topography of the city." At this time, the 3 of them were in a dark and long tunnel. If it weren't for the light of Tony's armor as a light source, there would be endless darkness in the tunnel. "To be honest, I still have a hard time believing what you say outside." Hawkeye sighed at Tony, who turned around and said nonchalantly. "Then I'll be honest, I don't really care if you believe it. If it weren't for the need to deal with the Australian official, I would never tell you about this." Tony's attitude didn't make Natasha and Hawkeye angry. After all, the two still know something about Tony Stark's temper. "Tony, you said that you have seen a lot of books from the ISIS that are beyond this era, so can you easily reveal some of the things recorded on them?" "Oh. Can't Miss Nate help but want to play to the characteristics of her profession as a secret agent? Just like the last time lurking around me. What else can be the professional characteristics of a special agent? Nothing more than stealing secrets and the like." Tony's sarcasm made Natasha's eyes narrowed dangerously. She swore that if it weren't for the need, she would definitely teach Tony a profound lesson. "Ahem, let's move on." Hawkeye made a circle, and then the 3 of them continued along the dark tunnel. In this deep and dark environment, it is easy to hallucinate and feel dizzy because of claustrophobia. Fortunately, the 3 of them are not ordinary people. The 2 top agents have experienced the most painful trials in the world and will not be afraid of this darkness. Tony, on the other hand, is driven by the pure and exuberant curiosity in his heart, which makes him full of motivation. The city of Nakit, which was once flat on the earth, now takes on a posture of obliquely inserted in the earth under the action of the vicissitudes of the sea. Like a plate tilted, the small part exposed beyond the desert is only a tiny fraction of the ancient city of Iz. And this part buried under the desert is the essence of that city that truly belongs. Tony walked the 3 of them through the ramps, gardens, and corners he had walked. Everything around is quiet, and occasionally there is a subtle sound of insects, and the rest is the breathing and heartbeat of the 3 people. If an ordinary person appeared here, he would definitely feel the most extreme fear because of the deep sea. But the Tony trio is still moving forward. Beyond the ruins. Coulson, who was guarding the edge of the ruins, was both expectant and incredulous at this time. Civilization 400 million years ago? Spirit projection? Communication in dreams? What Tony said was hard to believe. But since Nick Fury said he believed it, so did Coulson. Hey Coulson, are we going to wait here for Tony Stark to come out? Brock Rumlow came to Coulson and asked. Coulson nodded. What's in this? Rumlow asked curiously. Coulson laughed. Bullock, you know the rules, I can't say that. Gee, okay. Rumlow pretended to be helpless and shook his head. At this moment, suddenly, there was a faint roar from the earth, and then a motorcade appeared in the sight of everyone present. They carried billowing yellow sand and drove straight towards the ruins. After seeing this scene, Coulson immediately realized that something was wrong. Thack, let them signal immediately, get closer, and we're going to fire. Coulson immediately said to a member of the Special Operations team. But the gunshots that rang out immediately made Coulson's body stunned in place. He glanced back at Rumlow in disbelief. At this time, the other party was holding a pistol and smiling. Sorry, Coulson. Coulson fell to the ground, blood flowing from his chest gradually infected the surrounding yellow sand, and gradually the agent lost consciousness. But at the end of his consciousness, he clearly heard the sound of battle and the evil voice. Long live Hydra. The corner of Coulson's mouth twitched, and he felt helpless. Director, there are ghosts in the bureau.